Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Redeem Her Time podcast. This is so fun. God keeps bringing amazing women across my path. So I hope that you guys are really encouraged and blessed by the guests that have been coming here on the Redeem Her Time podcast. And today I am really excited to welcome Erika Millard to the Redeem Her Time podcast. I actually got to be a guest on her show last week. So we will make sure that we link to that as well, because there are a lot of parallels in what we do between time and money. But Erika, I'm going to let you just kind of introduce yourself in the way that you want to and tell us, like, what is it that you are juggling in this season of life outside of business?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And yeah, we have a very full life. So I am married to my husband. He is a career change resident. So he is in the hospital working in emergency medicine. So he is very busy. He works a
Mm.
lot right now in his residency program. And then we have four kids under 7 and under. So we have seven,
Wow.
6, 2, and 8 months. So
Girl.
four kids and my husband changing his career in residency and running a business. So it is fun and kind of crazy all at the same time.
And you still only get 24 hours in a day too, right? So here's where,
Exactly.
yeah, all of this matters. But I will say, just being on the other side of things, I have three kids who are now out of the house. It feels like those days are really long when they're little, especially when your husband is at work long hours. But just, I know you've heard this, oh, that time will go fast and the years go by really quickly. So, yeah, enjoy the time that you have with them because it's such a gift. So, I love that. And I love that you love the Lord and are really building a business to help others in their business. So, tell us a little bit more about the business side of you. What is it that God has called you to do, and how are you serving others through your business?
Yeah, well, I'm really thankful that I honestly, it was just a God story that I was even became a business owner. I was sitting in Starbucks with a girl that I had babysat, and she was interested in accounting. And so she just asked if we could chat about it. I did study accounting in school and then was in corporate accounting. And I was considering starting my own business, but I wasn't sure if that was the right step. And I was on my maternity leave. So we're sitting in Starbucks, and this man leans over and he said, "Well, I could really use someone, and I don't care if you work from home." And that was my push to start my own business.
Oh,
So
wow.
it just felt like a divine appointment because it was that thing that was kind of nagging in the back of my mind. And then it was just that push to get started. And then from there, it was all of these just, again, God connections. And so my business grew, my full service bookkeeping business grew only by word of mouth and through connections in the
Mm.
beginning. And so that is how I started out, was doing full service bookkeeping for clients. I do still do some of that, but through that journey, I also realized that there was a population of people who really needed help in the beginning or even a few years into business, of just couldn't quite afford a full service bookkeeper, but needed help learning QuickBooks or understanding the numbers,
Mm.
and just seeing a lot of time wasted
Mm.
spinning wheels around those nagging thoughts too, of just, am I doing this right?
Mm.
And what am I missing out on? What do I not know? And so that's who I also love helping now, is people who are doing their own bookkeeping as well as people who are ready to outsource it. So whatever stage you're in, I love helping people and really just giving female business owners, especially, the confidence to look at the numbers, understand the numbers, and make smart decisions from that place instead of just being reactive to things happening, expenses coming in your business.
Wow. Yes, I would call that a CEO decision, right? We have to be in our business and really be looking at where money's coming, where it's going, and make those sometimes really hard decisions about, what things need to happen, in this season. And I love the name of your podcast is Get Comfy with Numbers, right? Because I think there's this thing that, like, we oftentimes feel uncomfortable with numbers, like how many of us, it's like we kind of know in our head, like there's probably more going out of my account than there is coming in, or, whatever. And so it's kind of like that, like, do I even want to look at my balance? And when we look, we feel uncomfortable. I have the same conversation with women around their time when I ask them to either do a time audit or to look at their screen time, right? And to pay attention to their time. It's kind of like this like automatic discomfort. So let's talk about that a little bit, because if we're going to make CEO decisions, not only do we need to spend time looking at our numbers and, like you said, understanding them, but we also need to like use the word like confidence. Like we need to be comfortable and confident with the not only what we're seeing, but then what we're doing in response to that. So why is that so important? Maybe kind of let's start on the uncomfortable side of things and the unconfident side of things. Why is that typically the response? And what happens when that's how we look at our numbers? And then we can shift to, this other side of things of being confident and comfortable and making CEO decisions.
Yeah, well, I think money, especially in the Christian world, is still a topic that's hard to talk about. It's a little
Mm,
bit taboo sometimes. And there's so many things that we bring in to looking at numbers, right? We bring in past experiences, we bring in our childhood and how money was growing up. Some of my clients that I've worked with have failed accounting in college, or they are
mm,
just self-proclaimed like, I'm not a numbers person. I don't
right?
like math. Like, I have a lot of those. I have a few ladies who have math learning disabilities diagnosed. And so we bring all of that into this conversation. And it's like, no wonder it's uncomfortable because we have all of these negative experiences. I also hear from ladies who cry when they talk to their CPA, and just a
Mm,
lot of those feelings of feeling dumb, feeling like you don't understand, feeling like you have to act like you know, even if you really don't know. And so that is a lot of times the starting point in this conversation. And that's what I love helping people work through is, yes, there are some complex accounting principles, sure.
mm,
But the everyday business owner, you can understand the basics. And really, when you get to that place, it is my clients will tell me, the self-proclaimed, not numbers people will tell me that it's exciting and empowering to start looking
mm,
at it, because then they can start making, like we've said, those CEO type decisions instead of just letting everything happen to you. So that is the problem to the place that you can get to, the transformation, if you will, is just that you're able to make those decisions with confidence and with peace of mind. That there, a lot of times I hear like, I just don't know what I don't know. And so
mm.
when you can overcome some of that too, there's so much peace and confidence that comes with that. And I think as Christians, it's really our responsibility to be good stewards. And I
Mm,
personally think doing your bookkeeping or outsourcing it to someone, having your bookkeeping in control is part of stewardship, because otherwise you don't even know what's coming in and out. And so if there's nothing else that you take away from this conversation, it's that to be a good steward, we
mm,
really need to have our numbers and our money in order, so that, because a lot of us, we have these big aspirations and dreams. Like I think a lot of us, when we started our business, it wasn't out of greed or like necessarily
mm.
just to make money. A lot of us have goals to help our families, to pay off debt, to give more. And we really have to have things in order and be stewarding things properly in order to do that. So that was a very long answer, but all of those things tie into each other in how we steward our money, is getting back to some of those roots, just like you talk about with
Yeah.
time, of what is in your heart and what are those mindset shifts that we may need to overcome.
I love this. And I love that stewardship applies to both time and money, because you're right. Like they're both resources that we are given from the Lord. They're not ours. They don't belong to us. And ultimately they're not for us. And yet we've been entrusted with them. And so here's where we want to make wise decisions. Ephesians 5:15-16 says, look carefully how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, and so it relates to both time and money. We can, approach that wisely and we can approach it unwisely. And either way, it will have a consequence on where we end up, right? And what I'm just like envisioning is, kind of that business owner who's like, I don't know what I don't know, and this like makes me feel really whatever. And so she's kind of like, like plugging her ears or like head in the sand, and like, what's the cost of not taking the time to really put the time into into your finances when it comes to your business and things like that?
Yeah, so many things, so many costs. But one that comes to mind immediately is the stress. If you are just waiting until April to get all your receipts together and to try to organize everything, to go through all of your bank statements, it is both time and money that you're wasting because you're probably not going to even capture all of your deductions because you're missing stuff that you forgot because you're trying to do it in a stressful panic state instead of just keeping up with it and maintaining it on a month to month or even quarter to quarter basis. You're missing that. You're playing into the stress
Mm,
when you wait. And another, like I mentioned, another thing you're missing out on is some of the deductions. You're probably
mm.
missing some of the expenses that you may have forgotten about that you are legitimate business expenses. And then over time, it honestly costs so much more if you end up outsourcing your bookkeeping, it costs a lot more for someone to clean up bad
Mm.
bookkeeping than it does to just maintain it right from the start. So if this is your sign, if you are someone who has been lingering, get some help, go ahead and get it cleaned up. If you are newer to business, start from the beginning because it will actually cost you a lot less money.
Yeah, right. With anything that we put on credit, I call it, is always going to cost us more down the road. Time, money, energy, stress, like, ah.
Yeah,
So this
totally.
is this is so good, right? And we are in business to run a business. You look at any Fortune 500 companies and they are paying attention to their numbers. And yeah, sometimes the numbers aren't what they want to see, but guess what? They let that inform the decisions they're making instead of just ignoring them or, hoping they'll go away on their own or whatever. And so us really paying attention to this really matters. So start moving us in this direction of, okay, now I'm not maybe going to be so scared. And you talked about two levels. So that first level was like, the business owner who is starting to look at their own bookkeeping and either kind of, getting things. I'm especially thinking this episode is coming out near the end of October. So we don't have that much left of 2024. And so kind of she's thinking about like, what do I need to do to make sure before I end a year that I've got the things that I do. So let's, kind of start moving that in that direction. How can she start, feeling comfortable with the numbers, understanding what they mean, like, walk us through just a couple of beginning steps.
Yeah, so the very most basic practical thing that I preach is to make sure that you are separating your business and your personal expenses. That is the easiest bookkeeping tip. Because no matter if you end up using a bookkeeping software, it's much simpler. But also, if you're just using a spreadsheet, it's way easier to have everything coming out of one account than it is to sift through all of your personal transactions and figure out what is business. So that is the very first, most basic step is to separate your business and your personal. And this is also really important because if you are an LLC or you become one, it can mess up your LLC legal
Mm,
status if you mix your business and your personal too much. And a lot of people don't know that, but it can mess up the protection because you're mixing everything. And so it gets confusing. But every time I talk about this, attorneys are like, yes, please tell the people
mm,
that it can mess up your LLC status. So that is the very most basic step. And then the next thing to think about is what kind of system do you want to use? Are you going to use a spreadsheet or are you going to use a software like
mm,
QuickBooks?
mm,
There's a few other softwares, but QuickBooks is the one that I am the that's my favorite for now. It is the household name and it is the easiest, in my opinion, at this point. If you do want to outsource your bookkeeping, it's the easiest to find a bookkeeper that works in it.
mm,
There are a few other softwares that are equal in competition, but it's harder to find a bookkeeper that will work in them. So for the price and for what you get, I still think QuickBooks is the best. So decide, are you going to use a spreadsheet? Are you going to use QuickBooks? And QuickBooks, the perks of a system is that it can automate some things. So it can save you time. You don't have to manually input everything into a spreadsheet, but
Mm.
there's lots of automations and features in there that make things go quicker. And so most of the time I say if you're spending hours and hours inputting manually things into your spreadsheet, it's time to graduate to a system. And then from there, you really want to think about what is that bookkeeping routine that you're going to set. So
Mm.
this is where a lot of people struggle because this is where we get into, oh, I'll just wait until once a year.
Right.
But I really recommend doing your bookkeeping monthly. And I have a free bookkeeping checklist. So if you are like, okay, when you say do your bookkeeping, what does that
What does that
even
mean?
mean? I have a checklist that walks you through, okay, do these 6 things every month and you'll stay in really good shape bookkeeping wise. And some of my clients like to create, especially when you're creating a new habit, they like to maybe go to their favorite coffee shop and do this every
Mm.
month. They like to light a certain candle or get a favorite treat or something just to kind of excite yourself about
Good
actually doing
mood.
it and
Yeah.
changing that mindset. Some of my clients respond better to pain, and so they actually won't pay themselves until they've done their bookkeeping. So whether you're in either camp, there's some of those kind of tricks that you can implement to really make sure that you stick to that routine and force yourself to do the thing that you may not want to do.
I love
So
that. That's hilarious. Yeah. So are you going to respond to the pain or are you going to respond to the carrot? Right.
exactly. So those are a few basics to get in place if you are doing your own bookkeeping is really just getting the system and the routine simple and easy. That is the first step because we can't actually get
Mm.
into the decision making until we have clean and accurate numbers to look at. And so a lot of people want to jump to like, well, how do I know what I can afford in my business or when can I pay certain people? And we really can't know that until we have accurate data to inform us. So those
Mm.
are the few steps to be taking. Another thing to think about is if another question I often get is, well, when is it time to graduate from doing it myself to outsourcing it to someone else? And I this is not a one size fits all formula, but if you're starting to get into about it taking 2 to 3 hours a month, that's probably when your cost benefit is going to push over.
Sure.
So if you are someone that has a more simple business and you really only have the same recurring transactions every month, well, we can automate that pretty easy and you may not need a bookkeeper. But when you start having payroll, when you start invoicing a lot of clients, when you start having hundreds of transactions a month coming through your business, that's probably a time where it's better for you to focus on your zone of genius and outsource the transactions and data entry to a bookkeeper. But I just want to remind you that even when they are doing the data entry, it is still your job as the
Mm.
CEO to then make the decisions. And I hear often, well, I hired this bookkeeper, but I don't think they know what they're doing, but I don't really know what I'm doing enough to know if they know what they're doing. And so that is another thing that I want to help prevent is that you would know enough about your own numbers to know if their advice and their recommendations are actually the right steps for your business. So that was a lot thrown at you, but those are all just steps in the process of bookkeeping.
Yeah, so you've given a lot to think about. So let's kind of, I want to kind of go back to like kind of the first steps. And I love how you're focusing on this is something that should be an ongoing routine. It's a reoccurring task. So we shouldn't be like, oh, I forgot to check my numbers. This is what I teach my CEOs inside of when we build out our CEO workflows is anything that needs to be happening in some kind of regularity, right? Whether that's once a week, once a month, once a quarter, even once a year it needs to have its own workflow so that it triggers when it's time to do that. And so I love how that, yes, that will save us stress and time when we're not like all of a sudden realizing, oh my goodness, it's been 6 months or it's been 3 months or, whatever it's been, or, oh, it's tax season and I haven't even thought about this. So that was really helpful. And then I love how you like also came at the side of when is it time to hand it off? Because what I heard you saying was when you're starting to spend 2 to 3 hours, is that the best use of your time as a CEO? Right? Like, and this is one of the decisions I help CEOs make is yes, in the beginning of your business, you probably wear all the hats, right? We're the solopreneurs that are doing everything, making everything happen. But at some point, it gets to the point where you're not the only person in the world who can do it. And, right, like probably not the most qualified person that can do it either. And so when we can then offload it by delegating, by hiring someone, then those 2 to 3 hours, you just got back to go do the things that only you can do, which are probably going to be the content creation, the connection calls, the actual like serving of your clients, and things like that. So I love how both of those, kind of really turn, look at the difference there.
I do see this is where sometimes it can become a pain point because finances can feel a little more personal. So I
Sure.
do feel like this is a job that sometimes is harder for people to outsource because they want a little bit more sense of control and it's
Mm,
harder to loosen that grip. But again, that's where if you understand the basics and you know the pieces of what should be happening and the basics of bookkeeping, then this helps it be a smoother transition because then you can have the confidence and not have that nagging thought of, I'm not really sure if they know what they're doing because you
mm.
would know the red flags and you would know and have confidence in that person because you've done some of these steps on your own before.
Yeah, that's so important. As CEOs, we don't just like delegate it and forget it, but we also don't micromanage it either. So it's finding that right balance between being able to be hands off enough that we can trust that person is doing it, but also, like you said, aware that it's being done right. Because ultimately, the buck stops with us as the CEO, and it's going to reflect back on us if there's a problem or something like that comes up. So this has been really, really helpful. I'm just thinking, like that person who's listening today, and she's like, okay, maybe I, need to pay a little bit more attention. Maybe it's time to start having a system or, that kind of thing. Like, what's one piece of encouragement that you would give to her as she starts thinking about, how important it is to make time for her numbers and paying attention to what's going on in her business?
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge that there's a lot of people who may still be listening and thinking, but that's not really me. Like, she's
Mm,
not really talking about me. I'm a hot mess, or I'm a financially irresponsible person, or any of those things. And really, the types of confidence and empowering decisions I'm talking about are things like, okay, looking at your reports and actually understanding the words on them and not being intimidated by that. Looking at your sales and being able to see, okay, which of my packages are selling more or less? Which things am I spending advertising or marketing efforts on? And is that actually increasing that income or not?
mm,
Am I spending money unnecessarily on subscriptions that I forgot I signed up for? Am I actually getting a return on the bigger investments that I've made in my business? Can I actually start saving a little bit of money so that I can outsource or delegate some things? All of those types of decisions are where I think it gets exciting and empowering that you get to make when you do the kind of more mundane tasks. Then you can
mm,
get into a little bit more of the strategic stuff of, yes, I can actually see where my business is going and growing. And you
mm.
really can't do that just once a year. So that's the picture that I want to paint, is that you actually understand what's going on in your business and you can make decisions from that instead of just being reactive to how much cash you have in the bank.
Right, right. And I love this. And I hope that our audience is hearing today that spending time looking at your numbers is something that's going to have a good ROI. You may not love what the numbers are, you may not understand them at first, but it will always be time well spent because it's going to lead you to making those right decisions moving forward. And so when you're hesitant to be like, when we don't understand something or it doesn't feel good, we tend to like, find other things to do, like fold the laundry or, go wash the dishes or something like that. That sounds way more fun than looking at my books. But this is time that's going to have a direct impact on your business and is time that's really well spent. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Where can people connect with you? Tell us about your podcast because my listeners love podcasts. So I want to make sure they go find that. And then you mentioned a checklist because I'd love to link to that in the show notes. So tell us a little bit about where people can connect with you if they want to learn more or really start coming into your world or working with you.
Yeah, well, my podcast is Get Comfy with Numbers, and we talk all things money and bookkeeping and QuickBooks on the show. So I would love to have y'all over there. I'm also on Instagram at Erika_Millard, and my website is the same, erikamillard.com. And that's where my free checklist is, but we can definitely make sure that we have the link available too. But yeah, that's where I hang out. So I would love to reach out if you have questions. I'm a pretty open book and I love just having these types of conversations with people.
Okay, my audience knows this. I always invite my guests to come into the Redeem Your Time community because you may be sitting here right now going, okay, but you don't understand my business or I don't get this or whatever. Like I've invited Erika to come into the Redeem Her Time community so that you can ask her questions, right? Or so that she can then kind of help us walk through some questions maybe we should be asking if we don't know what questions to ask. So if you as a listener are not already a part of the Redeem Her Time community, what are you waiting for? Like this is always time well spent. And we don't do it on Facebook where it gets really noisy and crowded. It's over on a separate platform so that we can come in, be really intentional with our time, and then go, invest our time where it matters. So you guys, if you're not a member yet, you can go to redeemhertime.com/community. And yeah, come join the conversation, come ask questions, come learn, find out what you don't know that you don't know. And let's start, making sure that we do feel comfy with numbers and we're able to make those confident CEO decisions around them. So thank you so much, Erika. I really appreciate you and your expertise. I've learned a lot and am really inspired and encouraged to, do the same in my business and think about how I can delegate that as well. So I really appreciate you taking the time today. And I always love to end with this question just to, we think about like, we all have choices, and I'm sure you run into this a lot in the financial world, right? We have choices where we spend our time, right? We can spend our money. We can spend it, and get this cute pair of shoes, or we can really invest it and see an ROI. So for you, when you think about the time side of things, what is your ROI? Why? Like, why do you want to see the impact of the way you spend your time continuing to grow?
Yeah, I just have been so excited to watch the transformations of the people that I work with. And so for me, it is making sure that, as a mom, as my husband is super busy, I want the time that I spent in my business away from my young kids to be impactful and
Mm,
impact more entrepreneurs.
mm.
And so being able to see more of those transformations helps me to focus on making sure that I am spending my time wisely so
Mm.
that I can see more of those transformations.
I love that. And like I said, that is always time well spent. So then you can go spend time with your family knowing that you have made a difference when you've been working on your business. So thank you so much, Erika, for being with us today. I appreciate you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. If you have a business bestie or a two or a few who also need to be looking at their numbers or thinking about their time, please make sure that you share this episode with them because this is how we help more go-getter Christian women business owners to be intentional about where our time is going, where our money is going, and how we're ultimately using both of those things as stewards for God's kingdom. So thanks, everyone. Thanks so much, Erika.